Well, good morning as we're sitting here at LTV on this beautiful morning, December 6th, 2022, here with the Hello Hello Show. And my name is Haim Mizrahi, continuing with the tradition of public access and the tradition of the Hello Hello Show that's been on the air since 1980. Some people say 1980, 1982, 1982, 1984, but about 4 decades of activities and realizations that bring this station to become what it is. Of course, not to fail to mention the contribution by Fraser Dougherty, Francis Ann, and of course, the likes of you out there that make it your business to enhance and fortify the concept of public access. This morning with us is Barry Mccallion. First of all, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
On a short notice, we never met, which makes it even more appealing and all that. And I was trying to think to myself, what is it that I think that you are, that I think that I can find comfortable to mention, to say above the fact that you're an artist at heart, a poet, an experimenter, an explorer, and so much more within the reality of unfolding passion. So I'm looking forward to be able to decipher if at all that's a possibility.
That's a series of very heavy hats for which I thank you. I hope they fit.
Which I have a feeling that you indeed even more so than what I, in my limited ability, tried to describe. But first of all, congratulations for the show at Colm Rowan's gallery. That's a fantastic, beautiful. I went there just to say hi to Colm, and I saw what I saw, and he gave me a quick tour, and immediately I realized that this is really something special, and I highly recommend. And I already mentioned twice that people should make it their business to go and check it out. Right. And a resident of East Hampton, above all. So why don't you kind of share with us a summary of who Barry is?
East Hampton background, that my parents, like other working class cousins and uncles and aunts, came to Springs in the early 40s. Not permanently, just for what they could afford, a week or two in the summertime. And I think because we were kids from the Bronx and from Queens, it was an easy place to imprint on. Absolutely gorgeous, for all the reasons why people still come. So when my wife and I came back from Europe, in the early 80s, we took a look, and my parents' house, the place that they had rented, was pretty derelict, but we were able to buy it, and we live there now.
That's good. You know, I when I think of creating books, like bringing to life something out of nothing, so to speak, in the shape and in the way that you're doing it, what lies behind the art of putting a book together in by way of making a statement, by way of accomplishing a desire?
I think, well, first of all, maybe your audience doesn't know, but
once again, just one last thing. That's good. That's much better.
That perhaps your audience doesn't know, but I do make books. I combine texts by poets or writers that are of particular interest to me, and I think what I do, or like to think what I do, is different than illustration, that there's an effort to enhance, that to create a third thing instead of allowing just the text to exist and just the visual part to exist, that hopefully something else is created that is greater than the one or the other. So I make that sort of book, which you can.
How do you determine the relationship between one and another? Like the forces that are actually find themselves active within that space. How do you define that relationship in order to give more weight here, less weight there, more emphasis here, more because obviously does it go by a topic, subject matter, or just the feeling of the moment?
Certainly the subject matter, certainly my emotional response to the text.
Do you try to keep loyal to the text, or is it just?
Oh no, definitely. I don't change the text. I might create. I
mean, as a painter, when you have the text, does it serve you word by word, or is it just like a general feel that actually?
In a funny sort of way, I think that I like to think that I behave like a writer, even though I'm the visual part that comes in. Because I think part of making a book that responds to a particular text is to put yourself into into the world of the text. If I'm doing a book, let's say, as I have done, something of Joseph Conrad's, for instance, the Typhoon, for instance, it dictates the mood of the visual work. It dictates the configuration of the elements. Typhoon gives everybody a certain picture, and I try to work with that picture. And the pleasure for me is that I can move from a book like that with its elements and its dictates, and on to, let's say, a poem by Yeats that's completely different, different mood, and I can try to enter that spirit as well.
So did you ever, for example, try to respond to a poem by your own poem that won't be on display but will serve a purpose by just like as your own personal intimate guideline as you creating the painting or the artwork for the sake of the poem that you're working for or chose to use?
I've written things.
Does that make sense at all?
No, sure, yeah, sure. I mean, I've as I said, I've written things like everybody else in the universe, right? Has written things. Do I really think I want to try to compete with Yeats? Absolutely.
I mean, in a way that nobody would know about it. It's only that it will serve. Yeah, that will serve as a point of reference. You know, there's something that as an extra tool.
Do I have a closet full of material? No. I try to stick with the heroes. But also the books in my in the work that I've done, and me being an artist for as long as I have been, the books have a special sort of place, and they fit into a larger narrative. And there's I created a character. My background is in both English literature and art history, and then in the visual arts. So I think that there was perhaps an inevitability, a happy inevitability, that I was going to combine the two at some point. As a young guy in graduate school out in California, I created a character. The two possible paths for artists in the early 1970s, late 60s, 70s, was either the abstract expressionism that was so powerful here on the East Coast and
was becoming at its most becoming.
Absolutely, and in contrast to that, the upsurge of kind of John Cage thinking in theory, in concept art, the kind of work that Rauschenberg was doing, questioning art, the kind of work that Jasper Johns, of course, was doing, and Warhol, bringing elements from the street from commerce into the work. So those two seemed to be the possible paths, and I didn't like the looks of either one of them because they didn't fit. And I was lucky enough that something happened, and I was able to invent a character, so an oarsman, and somehow the oarsman fit perfectly because, as a concept, as an image, because like the rest of us in life, the oarsman rows with his back to his destination.
Yeah.
So he or she can't see what's coming up next. You get a glimpse, you get a glimmer.
But isn't it that sometimes we have the reflection of what we cannot see facing our back as we face the front of it, so to speak? So there's a reflection on the surface of the water, so we can actually see what's to a certain degree.
You'd see a sunrise, you'd see a sunset.
Or you see motion, you see a general direction, something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are we completely at a loss? No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Do we have a rear view mirror? Not so much.
Also, the question of why does the horseman, why does he want to, why is it kind of rolling backwards, so to speak?
Because that's the nature of the rowboat, unfortunately.
Yeah, but then there's so much room to contemplate of what it really means,
Sure.
I
think. Well, that was what was fascinating to me.
And it's still an ongoing scenario in your life, I would assume. It's not like it. I don't see something like that comes to an end.
Exactly. because we're rowing neck and neck. In a sense.
Yeah, exactly. So for example, the artists that you choose to either painters / poets or poets that you choose to use that are no longer living. Did you ever contemplate of how they would have felt if they were to be alive, knowing that you were you creating the way that you create, using their poems or their? Did you ever think about that at all?
You mean how Joseph Conrad would like my book?
Yeah, something a little that runs a little deeper than that. It's like, but did you ever think about that?
An appreciation. I guess it would take a little bit largeness of spirit to be able to accommodate to take on a passenger in that analogy, because if Conrad's got his own boat and Yeats very much so.
Oh yes,
and so
of
on
course.
And so forth. So yeah, they'd have to loosen up a bit to think, okay, this is good, collaborating.
So do you think those greats leave room to consider people like us and to give respect to people like us, or they did at all if they had a chance to?
I think they just think about their work.
Their work. That's it. That's what I expected to hear.
I really think that's it.
So it's almost like indirect disregard. It's like
that's a nice phrase.
In more ways than one. They know ahead of time they cannot be bothered if they want to be as serious as they really are, and especially if they devote their life to the extent that they do, they can't. They can't be bothered by it.
Yeah,
for lack of a better word.
The focus is laser sharp.
So what role does the oarsman play in your life? In your life as a whole, including the oarsman and other than the oarsman?
The character set a because of the image and because of the simple picture of a man in a rowboat with oars. Set free a whole rolling notion of where's he going? Will he have destinations? What kinds of things does he take with him? So the first thing I did was I made provisions for the boat so that when he started out, he would be capable of sustaining himself. And I figured that, cheese was essential, something to drink was essential, sausage was something that would keep, etc., and books. So when I made those first provisions, I made paintings of cheeses. I made cheese objects. I didn't use actual cheese. I made bread paintings and things like this. But the books, I felt, were an essential part of the provisions. So back in the early 70s, I had moved to England for a year. I made about 20, 25 small books that are quite different than the things that I make now, but that's what they were.
I noticed that as limited as my knowledge of your work is, that your collages are very mindful, very considerate. Usually when I see collages, it's more kind of leaning towards recklessness a little bit. This is the nature of a collage, rough edges, you know. But you keep that integrity of the surface as if it's a painting. You create a collage, but still you handle it as a painting. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, not all painters handle paintings like with you mean sharp edge?
Well, I mean that just the whole hygienic look is so appealing, you know, that you actually realize that it's a collage, but it looks like a painting almost.
I admire. I have to say, I admire and I envy artists who can really let stuff fly. And my pieces are more controlled, and that gets back to one's nature, I think. They're controlled in technique. I like to think that they're free imaginatively.
Yeah, definitely.
But
I actually mention it as an ingredient of admiration. I admire that. That you
it's a reflection,
and also that kind of consistency and it shows, and I like that. Even when I experiment and I fly all over the place, I try to keep present. You know, I like to be available for whatever that means. You know, I like people to look at me and say he's approachable. You know, I can be as brilliant as I want to be, but I'm approachable.
Sure.
People can come and get a handshake from me, so to speak, you know, and all that. So, you know, speaking of cross-implementation, as far as mediums, and of course, we don't see that many people that write poems and play music and paint paintings. There are some, but I mean, in my life, it was a given. I was always a poet. I always wrote. And I always played music. I was a drummer since the day I knew myself, and grew up in Jerusalem and all this, and being very, very serious about and then realizing later on, when I suddenly became an artist, that it's all actually that I can ask if I need help. I get it from my drum set or my.
You ever tried to play one of your paintings?
Oh, by all means, successfully. By the way, successfully.
This is like Rauschenberg on roller skates.
Oh my God! So, so I always resolve issues by, let's say, in my studio, I always have my drum set. So if I have an issue, and I do have issues, obviously, I don't know where to go, what to do, how to proceed, and so I go to my drum set and I resolve it there, and I pretend as if I can take that package and reintroduce it to the canvas. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. I'm not so sure people are aware of how magical this is. Can we talk a little bit about cross-implementation, taking from one medium that you have some capability in doing and using it as a tool to implement and to make it your life easier, especially when it comes to painting,
Sure.
which I think is the most difficult medium out of that whole package.
I think sometimes we have a predisposition, a little personality magnets that seek out others. I was lucky enough. In my 20s, I wrote a letter to John Cage and said, "Here I am in California. and there's people are doing this and people are doing that, other artists, and nobody's doing the kind of work that I'm doing, playing with ideas of chance and indeterminacy, which were absolutely derived from Cage and his books that I admired enormously at the time. And he was very gracious. He wrote back and he said, you should get in touch with Dick Higgins. Dick Higgins and Allison Knowles had just arrived in California at CalArts in Valencia. And they were part of something, they were one of the early initiators of a movement called Fluxus. And Fluxus, I'm happy to say, did exactly that. They were intermedia people who were dealing with text, dealing with visuals, dealing with performance, really mixing media and breaking down barriers between things. So I was very fortunate. I was introduced to them and through them to other people. They were a bridge for me to get to Germany, for instance.
How was your experience in Germany? I read a little bit about your 3-4 years, and that's where you met your wife.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about that, because I have a special connection to Germany, even though I have an incredible amount of resentment as being a Jewish and being aware and a scholar when it comes to reading all books that are ever written about the Holocaust, pretty much. But still, can you share with us?
My experience of Germany was very special in the sense that I entered a very rarefied atmosphere in Berlin, in the wall-encircled Berlin of 1975, 76, in which the German academic exchange invited 2 Americans, 2 French, 2 Portuguese artists from all over the world, to Berlin as part of an artist program. Berlin, because of the wall, was being funded by Bonn, the then ersatz capital, as a kind of a way to artificially respirate Berlin as a cultural center. So again, it was embedded. It was like Manhattan, Manhattanites. We have New Yorkers. We have a kind of fortress mentality. Berlin definitely had a fortress mentality.
Yeah, especially because of the wall.
Absolutely, because of the wall. And you had to go through serious border checks just to drive through East Berlin.
But even now, without the wall, it still has that fortress reality.
I think Berliners, like New Yorkers,
it was bombed so much that that feeling never goes away.
When I first went, there were still strafe marks on the edges of the walls and so on.
Amazing.
So forth,
I was there the first time in '76, so.
Yeah. So okay.
Yeah. Just for
we
months.
Were there at the same time.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Yes.
You were 4.
No, I was 16, 17.
Anyway. Yeah.
So, in that sense, it's. I actually I want to go a little bit back to the oarsman, because in Hebrew, the translation of someone who rows a boat, the magic of the Hebrew language is that you can really crisscross the letters and create new words. That's the beauty of it, and it comes directly from the Bible, the Old Testament, that teaches you how to do it. And one word that comes out of rowing has 5 letters, and the root of it is the word insinuating. So I realized that actually insinuation really is compatible with the word rowing, if you think about it. Because that action of insinuating, that motion and suddenly your
Because
journey.
you're ending with an element.
Yes, exactly, and because that insinuation is the actual propelling, and suddenly the journey is his journey and your journey, obviously, picked up a different meaning, or the same meaning but more enhanced. How do you feel about that? About this kind of?
Scared of the scholarship.
Yeah.
But there you are. No, but sure, that's not. I mean, that's. I mean, it's a lovely way of approaching the image. The notion that that the individual actually immerses himself or herself in a different element, and potentially, and if you take it a little farther, becomes a single unit with the element, with the water, for instance, so that you're not simply an isolated creature anymore, but that you've entered into the milieu and you become part of it, which is a kind of universality that we'd all like to feel at some point.
Yes, and also what it does is the question is what do you mean exactly by saying, what do you insinuate by sitting with your back to your destination and rowing, and you don't have the meaning look you in the face, serve as and offer clarity. So that sentence slash question, that question slash statement, what do you mean, i.e. what do you insinuate by actually, what is rowing actually, so it's almost like for me as a drummer, whenever I have a problem per se, I go back to square one. I go back to basics, the single stroke roll, the double stroke roll, the paradiddle, the triola, and all this. Because there I feel that all of my doubts, all of my hysteria, all of my hyperness, or whatever it is, it tones down, and I'm kind of leveling the planes, and then I can become myself again and recapture and continue, start all over again, whatever it is,
Sure.
to feel safe. So what solution do you give to the oarsmen in order to improve the character? What available solutions? I mean,
Improvement. That's tricky. Well, I think his encounters, because after I provisioned the boat and he sets sail, conceptually again, he doesn't just row endlessly, which would be, less than satisfactory to me, and less like life. What happens is that the oarsman encounters a series of islands. So the first island, for instance, that I postulated and created for him was an island in which the people that he encounters are technologically primitive. So he arrives, they're welcoming, that's good. They look over his boat and they look at his provisions and they say things to him like, "You've come across open water with storms and rain and choppy seas, and all you have is bread and water and sausage and a few books.
and cheese.
Cheese, thank you. What about
Shelter.
things that would enable you to calm the seas of a storm? What about casting divinations or runes for the future?" So they come at him from a more mythic and mystical way. And what I made then, since this is back narrative for something I'm going to actually create, I made a series of ethnological objects, a series of rattles, a series of dance leggings made of cowrie shells, a coconut shell with a deer bone handle, that he could use to cast some divinations, and I exhibited those along with the island context.
Sorry about that. Life continues.
That's okay. All right.
So you're speaking of a journey, you know.
Right. Right.
So that's
I thought you were taking down my words of wisdom. I
no,
have no idea what you're
no, I sent a text.
I'm teasing.
But rowing endlessly, you said.
No, instead of rowing.
I mean,
endlessly,
no, I'm saying, I'm sorry. You said actually the opposite. You said he's not rowing endlessly.
Right.
How do you know that?
Because
Is it so when you create the island, do you expect him to visit those islands, or you know for a fact that he has no choice but to do that?
that's interesting. I expected him to encounter islands, islands being again metaphors for encounters. You move to a different country, you meet a different person. You imagine something significant that works or doesn't work for you. Those are all life encounters. And so the islands that I created were intellectual constructs at first and became objects second.
Now, what about company for the oarsmen? Is there a point to be made by not having company, that he's just the solitude and he's just all there is?
No, you're good, because around island 3 or 4, he takes on a passenger, or at least he acknowledges
The possibility.
He acknowledges the possibility, first of all, that other people are rowing, that there are others out there on the sea,
I see.
other lives that are doing, that are also being lived. And and about that time, I met my future wife.
So is his detachment is inflicted?
His detachment?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? I think it was just a condition. It was a temporary condition that perhaps, that perhaps he felt at one point he was alone and was lucky enough to find somebody to be with, and that he felt comfortable with at a later date.
So how did meeting your wife affected all the scenarios in the making that you were involved in as an artist? Obviously,
Being in love is very
Yeah,
confusing.
oh, yes.
It's just,
And-
it wrecks the hell out of a narrative. Knocks it cock-a-hoop.
yes, you count your blessings, and in the same time, you don't know if it's a blessing or a curse.
No,
No,
it all worked. It all worked just fine. Thanks. We were lucky enough that after the 4 years I was there 4 years in Berlin. Joanne had been teaching for a year before I arrived, and so she had been in Berlin for 5 years.
coming from where? Oh, is she German or
No, California.
California? I see.
But spoke fluent German because she had been there as a child
Yeah, I see.
in Austria, and so we had the good fortune of knowing a French couple in Berlin, Anne and Patrick Poirier, who were artists together, an artistic team. And they said, "Oh, well, you're moving to Paris, so you'd like to go to Paris." There's an institution in Paris called the Cité des Arts, which is a large building on the Seine.
Yep.
It's in a brilliant neighborhood. You get to look at the Ile Saint-Louis. They get to look at you, which is, a large residential block, less exciting. But when you make application to the Cité, ask for one of the sculpture studios because they're larger, and so on. Okay. So I wrote to the Cité des Arts, and I said I'd like to apply, and I wonder if I would like very much to have a sculpture studio. Well, the German character is one character. The French character is a different character.
Oh, yes.
And I received a letter back that basically upbraided me for being presumptuous. That number one, I would get in, and number two, that I would get one of the sculpture studios,
yes.
and a nice Gallic. Who do you think you are?
Yes.
So I settled in for the wait. And again, in typically French fashion, a letter came in a month and said, we're pleased to inform you that you have the Gardelaine Montfort sculpture studio at the Cité.
Well, so, you were rewarded for being courageous.
Well, I got beaten up and then rewarded.
Yes, I had a different experience with Paris. I lived there for 3 years as a truck driver, but that was like experience with the roughness of the pavements,
yeah,
and all that. So
and a bit of a rough and tumble, I would think, just with the
yeah,
social scene.
They are so complex characters there. Even just by you learn the language, you see that they already tells you the story about the people, just the language itself, complexity for the sake of complexity. They invented that.
One trip down the highways will.
The peripheric was my day school, my day teaching, my day, and my employer was a genius. He knew everything. That's long before you had the cell phones. Sure. So with every problem, I had to stop somewhere and maneuver, and so I can call and get the direct instructions, not directions. Yeah. So going back to your wife, as an artist, what happened to your life when you met your wife and got married, and here there's now there's another person that is indefinitely a part of who you are, who you're going to be, who you continue to be, maybe who you were. I mean, with that sharing, did what to your perspective? Life of an artist.
I don't know that it changed enormously. I continued with my work. When we came back to New York, things changed. There are realities in New York. I had my studio completely paid for in Berlin. I had a stipend in Berlin. When we went to Paris, I had my studio paid for 2 years. Joanne taught because her French was good enough for her to teach. So if there are two of you, perhaps there's a bit more financial security and so on. But no, aside from just being happy, you continue to do your work and think your thoughts.
So as far as creating a scenario / story, how do you make it? How do you secure longevity to the story? How do you make a story long and sustainable? You follow what I'm saying? I mean, at some point, as artists, I don't need to know you personally, but as I know as an artist, what it really means to tackle issues or being tackled by the issues, and then therefore have to, respond with tackling an issue,
Sure.
So how do we secure a smooth ride, so to speak, a frictionless journey, for that sake?
Frictionless would
like
be
you said,
ideal,
your studio was paid for 2 years, so something you don't have to worry about.
Yeah.
So parallel to that, what did you do in order not to worry about it, so you can focus on what's really important? Creation. Because it takes that. I mean, what
I
you're
don't-
doing
I don't-
needs the time, needs the focus.
I don't think I ever did anything to secure. I think in some ways artists have to be a little smarter, and I think in some ways artists have to be absolutely ignorant, you know, and oblivious to an environment that to which somebody else might respond and say, "Hell, I better get a job," or you know, "I've got 4,000 marks left," or you know, I've got 2 cents to rub whatever. Obviously, we ended up in East Hampton, and you don't get there by ending up in the gutter. So happily,
Yes, yes, of course.
happily. So things worked out.
But where,
And in terms of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
In terms of smooth sailing, I think I was very fortunate that the narrative, the built-in part of the narrative of the oarsman having to, being on a journey and moving from place to place and encountering island after island was a built-in way of constantly refreshing the narrative.
Securing continuity.
Absolutely.
So
and the fact that I'm breathing still.
Yes, of course, yeah.
In my age.
Very important. As we speak, where is the oarsman now?
The oarsman is wondering whether there's another book in his life.
No, but yeah, okay, that's good. But where is he physically?
Always a danger. Always a danger. I sure don't know how to respond to that.
That's good. Well, that's a good
I
answer.
thank you for the predicament. I think that's lovely.
So, because I thought I saw him when I was rolling into the station at Laos
In the
Point,
parking lot.
you know, taking a little detour through Laos Point on Maidstone Park. So is the oarsman supposed to give birth to something else?
I'd like him to be a strong enough metaphor for other people to say, you know, yeah, that's what I'm on. You know, I'm on a kind of journey, and the things that I encounter could be considered islands, if you wanted to think that way.
And how much of a mind of his own does he have?
Oh, I think that he's got as much of a mind of his own as I have. It's obvious that it's an autobiography. I do remember early on thinking to myself, I owe it to this character to make interesting decisions, you know, to take advantage of a possibility, a situation, the chance of going to England for a year when that was a complete blank page to me, although I was with a Fluxus group that toured England. But there were a lot of unknowns. And I think that the fact of the oarsman was hopefully a way of saying, be willing to embrace some unknowns.
Now, as far as being an artist, like per se artist, you know, brushes, colors, pigments, techniques, surfers, materials, and all this. So well, obviously, you and I know that we want to be better every time we encounter the surface, every time we accomplish a painting, start a painting, or have the responsibility knowing that there's a show coming up or whatever it is. So how do you make it your business to improve your skills? Is it something that is there coherence involved in that process, or is it a given in your life that as long as you paint, it equals progress?
I think that I have to have an idea for the next thing, and you can. I pour through the small library that I have to see if there are things that will interest me. I did a book on Beowulf recently, Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf. I did a book on of Yeats. I'm not answering your question.
That's good, but that's good information.
I can tell I'm not answering.
Yeah, but it's good information you're giving us. That's okay.
But I think in terms of, am I trying to improve technique or skills? No, but I'd like to come up with an idea that was new enough to challenge me.
So therefore, to challenge your technique and to put it in.
Right.
So you're an avid reader, obviously, I assume, without any hesitation.
I
I
like to read.
Yeah, obviously this is a strong part of who you are.
You bet.
And also not just reading. I mean, if you read Thomas Dillon or whomever, and you know, you can relate to the character, you can sympathize, you can, you know, whatever, all these wonderful things that. So you must be able to create a partnership in order to pursue what you're doing. I mean, here's the poem that so-and-so wrote. And this so-and-so poem is a part of this so-and-so book, which in itself is mind-boggling, yeah? And you're aware of that, and you hope that those that are, even those who don't know, and make it their business to go and purchase or open the book and say, whoa, yeah, of course.
Right.
So now, in order to not be overwhelmed by it, you must create an alliance of some sort in order to make that possible.
I don't want to be subservient.
Exactly. So, I mean, how do you get to the point where you achieve that? That's not easy at all, even without having any experience.
Sheer blundering ego.
Yeah.
I think that's what.
Okay.
I think that's what happens.
And it works, huh?
Again, this is where the artist as a jerk
How
kicks
does it?
in again.
How come it works? How come that it works like that? Did you ever contemplate? Did you ever take notes?
I just feel very fortunate that I can be that foolish and
reckless.
and come out the other end, arrogant, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that I like what I do.
Yeah, I think the word arrogant, you know, I had no evolutionary process that led me to become a painter. I know aspirations that my life, the journey of my life built up to meet that moment of becoming an artist. It didn't. It just happened suddenly because I was wandering long enough and enough to find myself being curious to do that. But I remember when I first started, my first show ever was a solo exhibition. So when I sent invitations to people, first of all, they said, we know he's a creative individual, but we never knew he was a painter. So when they came to my show, all of them asked the same question: which painting is yours? They thought it was a group show. Obviously, they didn't read the invitation.
Right.
They didn't even bother. They said, okay. And so I would answer, which isn't, you know, so. But the thing is, now I entered this zone, and because now you're saying being ego and all that, so it reminded me this feeling that I carried with me, and maybe to a certain degree still a little bit carry that, but thank God not enough to derail or to slow down my progress. So I realized that in this community, everyone and his uncle is a great painter.
Yes.
Rightfully so. So I was really afraid to make a fool of myself. It's something that really scared me more than anything. So I thought hard, how is it that I'm going to create a reality immediately, not an immediate reality, that will protect me from that, shield me from that. So I brought my work ethics into the equation of creating paintings. And my work ethics were second to none. I was a hard worker, and when I put my time, I can be 10 to 15 hours with 3 hours sleep, no problems. Second nature to me. So what I decided that quantity is quality. So, and then while the entire world would say, why are you creating so much? Slow down. And as if something is wrong, as if when you create fast, you cannot create quality. So, but I brought these two together. So I introduced and presented to people a scenario where there was such volume of work that they would not have time to critique the art,
Yes.
to even see the art.
Yeah.
It would be all, they wonder so much, how is it possible? But obviously, in order to do that, even if it's bad or good, it doesn't matter, just that. Where is it coming from? So I did that long enough for people to say, okay, you know what? We accept you.
We got it.
Yes, we got it. Now start painting, please.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So that was like, but the thing is, remnants of that never left me. So I like to be able to, when I know I need to come up with 3 paintings, I do 15. I have that within me. I'm not afraid of it. I think in the process I learned about many artists also, and visiting their studio and all this. I learned that they're depriving themselves prematurely and artificially from becoming who they're supposed to be, and that
Depriving themselves how?
from creating enough. They want to, but they slow themselves. They say,
But why slow themselves?
because they think, they think that quantity comes on the account of quality. This is how we're raised in this society.
Yeah.
They tell, why are you rushing? Where are you going? What is this? Slow down. Take it easy. Focus. They don't know that people can focus and do quality work while they're on the go.
Well, there's this Dutch painter named Van Gogh who did a lot of work.
Yeah, oh yes.
Yeah,
Oh yes. And what work? Huh?
And what work?
Yeah. But it's interesting that so when your ego came to the forefront, I assume that at some point you had to tame it a little bit, no?
Not in the studio, right? I mean, you just the studio is your domain.
Yes, of course.
That's where you do what you do. Yeah, I don't know if egos come. I think you just kind of whatever it is, whatever you have in the way of determination or recklessness, or foolishness that you think that you can keep on and survive. It's just a gift if you're lucky enough to have it. And friends who are, let's say, excellent architects will say that early on, meaning in school, they felt that they were not going to be great artists. Therefore, they became excellent architects. They did something practical, in other words, something applied to their aesthetic to something else. I think I was just dumb enough not to realize that.
and lucky enough. In
and lucky enough, sure. Yeah,
so
I'm quite serious about that. Actually.
So what does breaking through mean to you? I mean, is this something that, because I thrive on that. I need to live for the potential breakthrough.
I think
and I don't just wait for it to happen. I obviously.
Breaking through is a fun idea. I think.
But not realistic.
Oh no! I think it works. I think it works if you can make a piece, make something, and then say, "Did I really make that?" That's being so lucky at just the whole business of transporting yourself, dislodging yourself, just disrupting yourself, so that you look at a piece of work and say, I know somebody else did that. I mean, yes, I know it was my hand, but it was really a pleasure.
Yes. And then we realize actually that we have more control than we really think on that process, and we learn how to give ourselves a little more credit and regard. because in our society we don't have enough stages to give us the right amount of freedom and the environment that will spell nothing but encouragement and all this. We got to be responsible for it firsthand.
Yeah.
And then hope for that there will be a loving gesture coming our way, or some kind of a
Sure. A little acknowledgement.
Yes, absolutely. And then, but and realize at the end of the day, we realize it actually works to our benefit to be lacking something all the time.
You mean that keeps pushing you?
Yes, it's a
Little
given.
gadfly.
And then you are around and you thank all these people that deprived you from whatever you thought they did.
Indeed.
No?
Indeed.
I thank you so much. All this. But, okay, first of all, let me mention that we're sitting here with Barry Mccallion, and as we speak, his show is on display at Colm Brown's gallery, which happens to be in downtown East Hampton, for lack of a better description. Yep. And prepare yourselves for a wonderful, exciting, definitely not boring exhibition. And so, anything that you wanna maybe talk to us a little bit about this precious book that we're having on the background, and any points of reference that you want to share with the public?
Well, I guess just the notion of a book is rather special, because unlike a Titian or a Velázquez or a Van Gogh, you can actually handle them. There's a tactility about a book. There is the element of time, which performance has. For instance,
these are fully handmade, correct?
Yes. And using this is Yeats under Ben Bulben. It's a last poem of Yeats. Ben Bulben is a geographic feature in Ireland, a kind of plateau, and I use it in each of the panels, and working with.
So these are highlighted phrases. Yes.
These are. This is a poem from beginning to end.
Yes.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay, so it stretches out throughout the book, correct?
Exactly.
I see. So that's a fantastic idea.
Begins and ends.
So did you ever think that sometimes separating these paintings and having these paintings on display just like independently, because they're so gorgeous, regardless?
Well, one could, but then it wouldn't be a book anymore. And if you did take them separately, for instance, well, first of all,
I mean, in addition to the book, they will accompany the book like separately, regardless, because they are really beautiful, and maybe you never thought
there's
that.
only one of these.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
But I mean that you take, for example, this one and you create a larger painting version of that. Yeah.
I did that with in an exhibition at Illa Arts, ILLE.
Okay. Yeah.
Years ago, in which I'd made a book of the first chapter of Milton's Paradise Lost, and I had the book scanned, and I had prints made from 20 of the paintings. There were 48 small paintings in the book, and I had 20 pieces made, and they existed separately. On the walls.
Okay, we're almost running out of time, I realized, but you believe it or not, we almost devoured 58 minutes.
Talked ourselves to another island.
I think that I hate to cut you prematurely, but the good news is that you can come and see me anytime you want, because I'm here 7 days a week. And to say the least, I'm extremely intrigued and thankful to have had you here, and to start something that, as I said, to have this stage available is something in itself, by way of public access, something that we treasure here every day, and all that. And
My
so,
pleasure.
my pleasure too. But you know what? I'll give you the last word.
No, absolutely not.
I give
I have no idea what now. There's another predicament.
whatever it is.
Another predicament. Thank you very much.
Very good. Okay, so we're going to be here tomorrow as much as we were here yesterday and as much as we're here this morning. December 6th, year 2022, here with the Hello Hello Show. Thank you to my guest, Barry Mccallion. And my name is Haim Mizrahi. Keep up the good spirits. We know you're out there doing a great job by way of enhancing that concept and being a part of it. And we don't take it for granted. And all the best. And thank you. And Barry, I hope that our paths will cross again sooner
Really,
than later.
really
Thank you
my
very
pleasure.
much. There we go. Let's do this.